All right, time to talk some Rangers with the Hall of Famer Eric Nadel. And Eric, Rangers in a rough stretch right here. They just got swept by the Padres. They've lost five straight, and the Grand Slam thing just happened. Not a good series, but I think one thing that you identified the other day, specific to the bullpen, that now has permeated through really all levels of the team is this is a team that is not very healthy and are having a tough time trying to, I guess, connect the dots with all the guys who are popping up with injuries left and right.
Yeah, it's difficult, on a day when you have a couple of guys unavailable because they have thrown too many pitches in previous days, like last night with Hernandez and Rodriguez and Montero. Now you don't have the depth that you used to have, particularly, with Volquez as the next guy who would have slipped in there, and look at all the other guys who were gone, and Palumbo and Farrell, and obviously it starts with Leclerc, and the list goes on and on. Jabot was unavailable due to the suspension. At least he's back now. But it's tough. And then, look at the guys missing from the lineup too. Elvis and Calhoun, and last night Chu wasn't playing. And those guys really weren't hitting very well anyway. But the only way they're going to get back into a groove is if they can play regularly.
With the lineup, we're so conditioned with Rangers baseball to have one of the best offensive units in baseball. Even in what we perceive to be down years, it was still, as good as some other teams' good years. And now here we are. This lineup got off to a slow start, and the narrative was, okay, they're gonna figure things out. They're gonna get it going, and here we are. We're almost halfway through the season, and the lineup really hasn't. So I guess I'm curious. And obviously, they need to get more hits and more timely hits. But is there something you've noticed that has led to this and this team just not yet being able to get into a rhythm? Because they'll score 7 one game and you think, okay, maybe this is the start of something, but then the next game it goes back down, and it's more games of the bad before you get another one of the good. What stands out? How would you diagnose this?
I don't know how to generalize it. It seems to me that in past years the Rangers would have stretches like this quite frequently on the road, and then they would come home and they would always start hitting like crazy. They don't have that luxury anymore of a launching pad ballpark where they can come back in some kind of a collective slump, hit a bunch of fly balls that go out of the park for home runs that aren't going to be home runs now. They don't have that anymore. I don't know how much of a factor that is. Probably the bigger factor is they're just not producing with men in scoring position. Hitting about 230 or something with men in scoring position, and they're not hitting with a whole lot of power, and that's partially ballpark related and partially not. I don't know how to explain it. For the first couple of weeks, offense was down all over baseball, where the hitters clearly hadn't caught up to the live pitching yet, but that's changed. Over the last week, there's been a lot of offense around baseball, and the average runs per game now for this season is almost up to the average runs per game for the entire season last year. You can't use that as an excuse anymore. The Rangers just haven't come out of it where other teams have.
All right, so including today, the trade deadline's 11 days away. The Rangers play every day leading up to that date except for the trade deadline day of August 31st. And you mentioned this in the broadcast last night. Next 10 days are likely going to have a big role in defining the season. And it starts with 3 against Seattle, and I'm including Seattle as bad as they are because these are games you need to win. You need to at least take 2 out of 3 because then you got the gauntlet of the A's and the Dodgers, 4 against the A's, 3 against the Dodgers. They're at home, whatever that means in 2020. But leading up to the trade deadline, this is probably going to inform the front office of what direction they go. And even if it doesn't, just in the standings, there's a chance that, the next 10 days really it's the biggest 10-day stretch of any of the 6 10-day stretches you could come up with during the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm usually not one to put extra emphasis on any one game or any one series when there are a lot of games left. But there aren't that many games left. It's tricky this year, though. I don't think the trade deadline is going to be anything like any previous trade deadline in terms of the amount of activity. I don't think there's going to be much activity because teams that trade for players are only getting them for 1 month. Now, obviously, they're going to be thinking about what those players can do for them in the playoffs, but how much they're going to be willing to give up, I think, is going to vary greatly from previous years. I don't think they're going to be willing to give up as much. And so I really don't see a strong possibility of the Rangers making any sort of, impact trades either way. If they get back into it in the next week and want to improve in a certain area, I think the possibilities are going to be much less. And if, in fact, they don't get back into it in the next 10 days and they're looking to be sellers, I don't think they're going to get enough in return to make it worthwhile. So I just don't see the trade deadline as being a very big deal this year. I could be wrong, but that's what I anticipate.
No, I think the moves you're going to see are the low level I shouldn't say low level relievers, but the middle relievers who get traded for a player to be named later, or some low those ones. I think those deals still happen, maybe not in the same volume because they're more. In theory, there'd be more buyers and less sellers with 16 playoff teams. But I agree. These big names that are getting talked about, maybe one of them gets moved, and maybe someone who's got a few years of control, so that 1 month tag doesn't really hinder the value that much. But I agree. I don't think big names are moving. And I actually had a GM tell me that while baseball is in a much better place as we speak today than, say, 2 weeks ago from a COVID standpoint, there is a fear that if I trade for big name Joe and I give up, 2 good prospects and the season gets shut down a week later, or my team gets hit, and now all of a sudden I'm filling a roster of guys who are quote unquote minor leaguers, I don't get a take back. I don't get a refund on that trade. And I think that will lead to some hesitancy, even though, again, it does seem like the season is in a way better spot than it previously was. That risk is still out there. That unknown is definitely still a contributing factor, which is not something we've ever had to talk about.
Yeah, I hadn't even really thought of that, but that's true. That's another reason for teams to not give up a whole lot.
All right, last thing. So the Rangers are playing the Mariners. We had a great conversation of your favorite Johnson against the Padres. Who is your favorite Johnson on the Mariners in Mariners history? I mean, there's a layup here, but see if you go a different direction.
Well, it certainly wasn't Randy. I hated watching Randy pitch when he was pitching for the Mariners against the Rangers. There's probably no one who I despised watching pitch against us more than him. So I don't know that he's the guy, and I'm not immediately thinking of any other Mariner Johnsons. Who am I missing?
Yeah, I'm pulling up right now. And you also didn't have the world's greatest pregame interview with Randy back in the day, right?
No, he was upset one day. He had lost a no-hitter in the 9th inning the day before, and I thought it was a good opportunity to talk to him. And he agreed to do it. But then it was pretty clear once we started the interview that he wished he hadn't. I bore the brunt of it. And actually, during the break, when the interview was running, during the break, the phone rang in the booth, and it was Nolan Ryan. He was listening in the clubhouse.
Oh.
And I said, "What's going on, Nolan?" He says, "I'm just wondering one thing." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I'm wondering what you said that ticked old Randy off so bad."
So the only other Johnson is not Chris Jakubauskas. That doesn't count, but Rob Johnson, the catcher. So by default, Rob Johnson is your favorite Mariners right. Johnson.
I guess that. Actually, I got a better one for you. Darryl Johnson was their manager.
Oh, okay.
When I started doing this job. And he later came to the Rangers and was actually the Ranger interim manager for a while when Don Zimmer got fired. And he was a terrific guy, was really helpful to me. I was still very much learning on the job. And he was more than willing, both when he was the Mariners manager and, the Rangers first coach and then manager, to sit down with me and talk baseball and, really help educate me about things I needed to know.
Now, your favorite Smith could be Brick Smith, Carson Smith, Seth Smith, or Tommy Smith. Just, something to think about for next discussion.
None of them were big favorites of mine.
No, not at all. All right, Eric, let's go snap that losing streak tonight.
Very good. See you at the ballpark.